In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2022, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton DeShane.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Hello and welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? I want to start things off with a quick word of warning. Don't worry, we're going to get back to the action of Dark Legion, The Mummy's Hand, in just a moment. But before we dive in, first of all, I am one of your hosts, Dalton DeShane.
And I'm the other of your hosts, Dylan Roth.
I made sure to wait until Dylan was taking a drink of water before making him say something. If this is your first episode, stop where you are. You are turning on the movie halfway through. You're at the barber shop and someone just changed the channel to FX and you're halfway through the 1999 Mummy. If you want to have any of this make sense, please at least go back to the previous episode in the feed. We are currently about to do the second half of our big finale crossover film, picking up right where we left off with the first one. So look, you're an adult. You can make your own decisions. I trust you, but I would recommend giving the first half a listen. First of all, because it's really good.
Yeah.
But Dylan and I are here. We are picking up right where we left off. We went and got some McDonald's in the interim. We now have some throat coat tea because we are both losing our voices.
Yeah, we're dying.
Because remember, we're reading all of these lines as we record them because we don't have the cast yet.
The cast is not here yet. They overdub later, but in order to get the pace of the show down, to make sure, for ease of editing, we read the whole entire thing.
So we're way down with McNuggies and fries, and we're drinking water and tea, but you don't care about that.
Nah, enough of our yakking. We're going into the middle of Act 2.
Let's pick it up. Starting back in the middle of Act 2. Carol, Larry, Gwen, and Jack flee the British Museum as swarms of cops rush in. Carol is still upset, and Larry tries to lighten the mood.
Okay, so things are still bad, but as far as missions go, that was pretty successful. I mean, we killed the weird mummy wearing Nick's face, and we recovered 2 more pieces of set. Just 1 more, and we'll have collected the whole, set.
Larry?
Gwen is looking down at Larry's hand, concerned. He follows her gaze and sees that his hands look as if they've been burnt to a crisp, pitch black and decaying. The rot extends past his wrists. He clenches his hands and shoves them in his pockets.
It's fine. I'm just holding on to him temporarily. I can handle it.
At the bottom of the stairs, they find a tall gentleman waiting for them in an unseasonably warm trench coat and wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face.
Victor, how'd you find us?
I followed the sirens.
Smart.
I am here to assist in any way I can.
You sure, Vic? What about Cassie?
I have assured Cassie's safety in the short term, but I have a feeling that ensuring it in the long term means being here with you.
So, what do we do now?
Everyone looks around, but in the end, all eyes fall on Gwen.
Great. Okay. Step 1, we circle up, fill Victor in, and figure out a new plan.
Larry perks up.
It's time to head to the unofficial Dark Legion mobile headquarters.
You don't mean...
We cut to a nearby Nando's, the official restaurant sponsor of the Dark Universe. The gang sits around eating, and if you want to pay for any ad space, Nando's, just let us know. We're always happy to help friends out.
Yeah, or free samples. Send them your mail.
Yes, I love hot sauce. Send me some of that peri-peri sauce.
Yeah, we've never had Nando's.
I've had the sauce though.
Have you?
Here. I have some in my fridge.
Oh, sweet. We should probably try that out.
Yeah. The gang sits around eating while the other patrons gawk at the chicken and soda floating in midair and the 7-foot giant in a coat. Larry and Gwen, driven by their wolf appetites, scarf down their double portions while Carol only picks at hers, distracted.
So, our plan is twofold. First, stop this disfigured phantom and rescue Jenny.
Assuming she's still alive.
She's still alive. We just don't know where to find her.
Until we do, we proceed to our second objective, rescuing Nick Morton from his burial ground in Sudan.
Assuming he's still alive.
Which seems kind of unlikely, given that it sounds like he's been there for months.
Larry shakes his head and swallows another mouthful of food.
Nuh-uh. This one I know for sure. Nick is 100% still alive.
How can you possibly know that?
I can feel him. I have some kind of connection to him now that I have 3/4 of set inside me. I just get flashes. He's somewhere dark, surrounded by water. There's a cave and a beach?
That does not sound like Sudan.
It is and it isn't. I can't explain it, but I know that Sudan is where we need to go for the last piece of set.
Wait, the last piece is with Nick?
I think that's what's been keeping him alive.
Everyone is silent while they consider the horror of Nick's existence over the past few months. They all jump when there's a sudden knock at the window next to their booth. Jack starts choking on his chicken, prompting Carol to pound on his invisible back. Standing with his face nearly to the glass on the other side of the window is Indrid Cold.
Is that who I think it is?
Swell. It's Jenny's old boss from Prodigium, Indrid Cold.
On the other side of the window, Cold beckons them to come outside.
We're eating, you weirdo! Come inside!
Indrid just steps back and waits.
I fucking hate this guy.
The Dark Legion steps outside as Indrid climbs into a black limousine and holds the door open.
Get in.
That's it? No pitch, no hello, just get in.
We're not going anywhere with you.
Do you have a better way of reaching Cher?
The five of them exchange looks. Unfortunately, he's right. They have no way of getting to Sudan. Larry looks to Gwen for final confirmation, trusting her instincts above all else. She shrugs and nods.
I fucking hate this guy.
They climb in the limousine, and just before Victor closes the door...
Oh, wait, is Jack inside?
Yep, I'm here. I really should have brought a change of clothes.
They drive off.
What brings you to London, Mr. Cold?
Well, mostly I'm here to clean up the mess you made at the British Museum, something I should be arresting you for.
On what authority? You don't have any jurisdiction here. Do you? Wait, does Prodigium just disappear people?
Keep letting demons loose in public and you will find out. You should have come to me first. I have many contacts at the museum who would have been happy to turn over the canopic jars.
Well, if you're not here to arrest us, why take us to Amshire?
Because, unfortunately, Mr. Griffin...
Doctor, actually?
I have been made a liar by your friend Nick Morton. I told him I would not help him if he got trapped there, and yet here I am, all because he made a bigger mess than I could have possibly imagined.
What kind of mess?
He has become lodged in the Black Lagoon, disrupting the natural process of death in the region, and also turning it into an easy target for Imhotep. We need to retrieve him so the Black Lagoon will move before Imhotep arrives.
The Black Lagoon?
Chill, Cold. You don't have to worry about Imhotep anymore. We just killed him. He's toast. Decayed into dust right in front of us.
I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Mr. Talbot, but if you thought defeating Imhotep would be that easy, you have no idea who you're dealing with.
Okay, so who are we dealing with?
Imhotep was one of the most powerful high priests in all of ancient Egypt. He is the one who mummified Amenet and sealed Set away. He recently served a stint in the underworld and was brought back not as a man, but as a demonic entity, much like our mutual friend, Edward Hyde. You may have banished him from a body that mimicked Nick Morton's, but I'm sure by now he's found a new host.
What does he want?
Last night we received word that 2 unknown entities arrived at a Prodigium lab, formerly occupied by Dr. Henry Jekyll.
Jenny!
Yes, along with Imhotep in disguise and their prisoner Claudia Lawrence, who was exhibiting signs of demonic possession.
Wait, demonic possession?
We have reason to believe that Claudia is now sharing her body with the demon formerly known as Edward Hyde.
What?
Shortly after their arrival, someone accessed our server and cut all communication to the base. That individual, whom we believe to be Imhotep, then obtained all records pertaining to the Black Lagoon, a mystical realm that essentially acts as a back door to the underworld. We believe that he plans on breaking into the Black Lagoon and summoning an army of the dead through its gates as a means of taking over the world.
Whoa.
And what about my wife?
We sent a recovery team there a few hours ago. They found the bodies of our prisoner transport team, but no one else.
So she might still be alive.
Jack laces his invisible fingers through Carol's and squeezes. Larry sits up, bouncing in his seat, energized by this new challenge and ready to fight.
Okay. Time to save the world again. We can do that. So what's the word? What do we do now?
Now, Mr. Talbot, you relax and get comfortable. We've got a long flight ahead of us.
What about the lagoon? Do you have someone defending it in case Imhotep gets there first?
We have a pair of agents stationed on either side of the veil, but they're both, a little green around the gills.
Indrid laughs to himself about this. It's hard to watch and makes everyone uncomfortable. Cut to everyone on Indrid's jet. Victor ducks out of the bathroom and walks down the aisle. He passes Carol, sitting by herself and playing nervously with her wedding ring. Indrid also sits alone, seemingly sleeping with his eyes open. Then he sees Gwen and opens his mouth as if to talk to her, But she's focused on Larry sitting next to her. She looks at him with concern and gently touches his rotting hand. He instinctively pulls away, but then their gazes meet. They don't even have to speak anymore. The conversation is written on their faces. I'm worried about you. I'll be fine. I can handle it. It's okay to ask for help. I know you're all the help I need. Gwen leans her hand on Larry's shoulder, and after a moment, Larry leans his against hers. Victor leaves them to be together. He heads to the back of the plane and sits in a seat by himself, then springs back up.
Huh? Hey!
My apologies, Jack.
Jack mumbles something, and the seat fabric shifts as he repositions himself and falls back to sleep. A moment later, Larry plops down in the seat next to Victor.
A word of advice, Vic? She's about 100 years too young for you.
What do you mean?
I notice how you've been staring at Gwen ever since the wedding. I'm not trying to be territorial or anything, but she definitely doesn't vibe with you that way. I'd advise against making a move.
I am making no movements. May I ask your advice on something?
Larry narrows his eyes, unsure whether to take another jab or not. Yes, Victor killed his mom, but also they're teammates now. He nods slowly.
Sure, why not?
I have a gift that I've been waiting to give to Gwen.
He pulls out the wolf carving, intricate and elegant, its edges smoothed with time.
I made it for my daughter before I died. Our relationship was fraught. I never knew how to tell her how much she meant to me, how much she changed me for the better. I have determined not to make that mistake again.
Okay, so what do you need from me?
Emotional candor still does not come naturally for me.
I don't know. You've been pretty candid with me. Want to apologize for killing my mom again?
This hits Victor pretty hard, which was the plan, but Larry is immediately ashamed of himself. He sighs.
Look, you've got the right idea. Saying something with a gift is a good play. She's just got to know what the gift means.
Victor ponders this for a moment.
I made this token for someone remarkable. Strong-willed, brave, devilishly smart. But I did not value those things in her. I punished them and did irreparable harm in the process. Now, I wish to give it to someone who embodies that same indefatigable spirit and to celebrate it. To someone who has always been selfless where I have been selfish and from whom I hope to continue learning.
We cut to Larry. His skeptical, residually angry face has softened as he sees Victor's own pain for the first time.
I do not know how to say this to Gwen.
Like that, Vic. I think you tell her exactly like that.
They land in Sudan and take a jeep out into the desert, parking outside of the concentric circles carved into the sand.
Do not step on those,
Indrid warns. He leads them to a large tent erected just on the border of the surface lagoon. Inside, they find Hunter lying on a cot and playing a handheld game console. They don't look up.
What? Is it take your kid to the Black Lagoon day?
This is our guy on the ground, the keeper of the Black Lagoon.
Prodigium is using child labor now.
They were hired by their predecessor. It was not my decision.
One sec, almost done. Sorry, Phil. I gotta run. Yeah, I'll try to be on later.
Hunter takes out their earbuds and stands to greet everyone.
Hi, I'm Hunter. They, them.
Oh, I'm Gwen Conliffe. She, her.
Larry gives a smile and wave.
Larry Talbot.
Gwen elbows him.
Oh, he, him.
Why are you all talking like this?
Hi, Hunter. I'm Carol Laemmle. She, her.
Jack?
Does anyone please have any clothes I can borrow? I'm feeling really uncomfortable being naked around a kid.
Jack, it's fine. No one can see you.
Whoa, do you have an invisible guy?
Hey, no, stay back. I don't want you accidentally touching anything.
Hunter puts their hands up and steps back.
Do you all have powers?
Kind of. Larry and I are werewolves.
Oh, wow. I used to love werewolves.
Used to.
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Larry looks offended.
I hate to interrupt the pleasantries, but we are on a clock. Hunter, I believe it's time for the lagoon to move on.
Hunter nods.
Follow me.
The gang walks out into the desert circles, taking care to step over the patterns in the sand. Hunter leads, and Carol hurries to catch up with them.
Wait, so do you just live out here by yourself?
Sort of. I follow the lagoon wherever it goes. I've lived a lot of places.
What about your parents?
It's just my mom. We had a complicated relationship. I had to get out of there.
I see. What about friends? School? Being a kid?
Indrid sends me textbooks to study. I'm a pretty fast learner. And sometimes I'll make friends in the towns I visit.
What happens when you have to leave? Don't you miss them?
Yeah, but in my experience, friends aren't meant to stick around that long anyway.
Carol stops, looking concerned as Hunter keeps going.
We're here.
They circle around the boulder, looking down at the egg sack on top.
Yuck.
What is this, caviar?
Human soul caviar.
Set's favorite.
Larry shakes out his arms and prepares himself.
All right, Set. Time to move on. Can't say it's been fun.
He holds his hands out over the boulder, and his whole body stiffens. His iris is split in two, and then the veins around his eyes thicken and turn black. This black vascularity spreads down his face to his neck.
Hey, is he okay? Larry? Larry!
Larry doesn't respond. The blackness has reached his arms now, snaking down through his veins to his fingertips, where finally a thick black liquid begins to leak from under his fingernails. It pools on the boulder and merges, coalescing around the egg sac. The ink works its way up through the gaps between the eggs, finally finding the white one sitting on top and coating it until it's as black as the others. Larry's irises merge again, and he slowly comes back to himself.
Is that it? Did we do it?
I think so. I don't feel Set inside me anymore.
They stand around for a moment, waiting for something to happen.
Okay. Now what?
Is that supposed to be happening?
The Legion looks towards where Gwen is pointing. A massive sandstorm is washing over the nearest dune, blacking out the sky and heading towards them at incredible speed.
Do we run about this?
No, wait. Maybe it's Nick.
They stand as the cloud approaches, shielding their faces from the whipping wind. A smaller cloud of sand gusts forward towards them at the edge of the rings and comes together to form the figure of a mummy, rotting bandages hanging loose off of decaying skin. The mummy begins to walk towards them and yells in their direction.
My friends! Funny we should run into each other so soon.
Who the hell is that?
We should go now.
Who the hell are you?
Ah, yes. I suppose I look a little different. I should thank you for knocking me out of that old man's body and allowing me to seek refuge in one a bit more familiar.
What the hell is he talking about? Who is this guy?
Imhotep.
This new Imhotep smiles.
Can you smell it on me, wolf girl? The stench of death. Not mine, of course, but yours.
Victor steps in front of Gwen and begins to march towards Imhotep.
You shall have to go through me, priest.
As you wish, dead man.
Victor charges at Imhotep, grabbing him by the throat and lifting him up over his head. Imhotep grins, and Victor looks at him, confused by this joviality in the face of death. But then Imhotep opens his mouth and inhales, sucking Victor's life force away.
Victor!
Victor collapses to the ground, a shriveled up and decayed version of his former self. Meanwhile, Imhotep stands to his full height, no longer a mummy, but a full flesh and blood man, a young man played by Mina Massoud, and in this reading by Dylan Roth.
Ah, that's much better. The body of Ramesses II, ironically the child of my lover and my rival, but beggars can't be choosers.
Gwen rushes to where Victor collapsed and rolls him onto his back. He's emaciated, shriveled like a prune, but not quite dead.
Victor, can you hear me?
Imhotep sees that Victor is still clinging to life.
I'm impressed. For a rotting corpse, you've got a great deal of life in you.
Larry tenses, ready for a fight.
I've had more than enough of this guy. Time for round 2.
I would advise against that, Mr. Talbot. I would listen to Indrid, young cub, unless you want to accompany me to the Black Lagoon to see what lies on the other side.
Then, Imhotep's smile falls.
The lagoon. I can no longer sense it. Where is it?
We see the boulder. The egg sac is gone. The circles have disappeared from the sand. Hunter steps forward.
It's moved on.
How dare you? You've only delayed the inevitable. I will kill you all where you stand, abduct your keeper, and...
He is interrupted by a deafening shriek. Imhotep looks up, and the Dark Legion turns to find it's not a shriek at all, but the sound of 10,000 ravens crying in unison. A cloud of them approaches from across the other dune, as large and dense as Imhotep's sandstorm. A group of them flies ahead to where the Dark Legion stands and combine to form the shape of Nick Morton. The real Nick Morton, reunited with Set. Imhotep, we have a fight to finish.
I believe all our debts are paid, Mr. Morton. If I recall, you offered me your body willingly in exchange for sparing your friend's life.
And did you? Imhotep smiles.
For a bit.
Nick grits his teeth and steps forward towards Imhotep, flanked by the Dark Legion. I think it's time to send you back to hell.
Why don't you join me?
Imhotep spreads his arms and the sandstorm rises again behind him. Nick does the same and his cloud of ravens rises to meet it, each cloud as tall as a skyscraper. They shift and swirl, taking the shapes of each warrior's face, both of them roaring at each other as the clouds collide in the sky above. They form a tornado of sand and birds, collapsing inwards and then exploding out. The sand dissipates in the wind, leaving only the ravens flying overhead. Imhotep has disappeared.
Okay, did we kill him that time?
He ran, but he'll be back. And then his team is hugging him. First Carol, then Jack, then Larry. Gwen helps the emaciated Victor to his feet, and the two of them hug Nick together. Indrid and Hunter hang back and watch. For the first time, Nick smiles, then laughs, and hugs them all in return. They talk at once, saying they're glad he's back. They're so happy he's alive. They missed him. And then someone's shouting,
"No, everyone get back! That's not Nick! Get back!"
Jenny Halsey is running through the sand towards them, followed by Evelyn. She has her gun drawn. Everyone steps away and starts yelling at once, but it's too late. Jenny fires all 6 shots straight into Nick's chest, and he falls backwards.
Jenny, that's not Imhotep. It's really Nick. We brought him back.
What? Oh my God!
Jenny runs forward as Nick sits up, rubbing his chest. The bullet holes are already healing. She throws her arms around him, and they both fall backwards into the sand.
Oh my God, Nick, I'm so sorry. I thought you were dead and that Imhotep had replaced you.
I know. I'm not mad. They sit up, and she squeezes him tightly.
I'm so happy you're alive.
Me too.
Can I get a little of that?
Carol stands above them, unable to hold back her smile. Jenny climbs to her feet, and they run into each other's arms, kissing deeply.
I love you, Jenny.
I love you, Mrs. Jenny.
Victor is still leaning much of his weight on Gwen. The meat is beginning to return to his bones.
You gonna be all right?
I will recover. My work here is not finished.
Meanwhile, Carol has noticed Jenny's +1.
Who's this?
Oh, Carol, I'd like you to meet Evelyn.
Evelyn extends her hand for a shake.
Evelyn O'Connell, librarian.
Oh, please, she is so much more than that. You should have seen her taking on Claudia. She's honestly the only reason we're alive right now. You know, she might be the only woman alive who has more experience fighting mummies than me.
Huh? Is that right?
Jenny catches the tone in Carol's voice and shuts up, embarrassed.
Well, yes. I've heard so much about you as well.
I'm sure.
Nick and Victor rejoin the group. Okay, seems like I missed a lot. Who wants to fill me in? A little while later that night, the group gathers by lantern light in Hunter's tent. Carol and Jenny hold each other close as if they'll never let go again, Jack next to them and Hunter sitting in front. Larry's arm is around Gwen. Victor, Evelyn, and Indrid stand in the back. Nick sits on the cot, facing them all. And then it started raining, a black rain I'd never seen before. The droplets soaked into my skin, and I felt him again. Set. The next thing I knew, I was flying over the desert towards you all. I'm sure the creature, or what did you call it?
The ferryman.
I'm sure the ferryman is happy to be rid of me. Evelyn speaks up.
Sorry to interrupt, but my husband, Rick O'Connell, do you know what happened to him?
Nick shakes his head, but Jenny pipes up.
He escaped. I met him very briefly. I had no idea he was your husband. The last I saw, he was with Imhotep.
Evelyn's face falls. Indrid?
Hmm?
You were following me like a hawk on my journey to Sher. Surely you must know what happened to Rick.
Yes, well, a body was recovered from the hotel where he was last seen.
What?
But it was completely unidentifiable.
You knew! I've been working for you all this time, and you knew my husband was dead.
Evelyn grabs Indrid by his collar and pushes him up against a wooden support post.
Careful, Ms. O'Connell.
Or what? You'll have me locked up in another one of your impenetrable prisons.
She lets him go with a small shove and steps away, tears in her eyes.
I'm sorry. This isn't the time.
There's an awkward silence, and everyone casts dark looks at Indrid Cold. He doesn't seem to mind. Hunter watches all of this closely. They're learning a lot about their employer today. Right, okay. Hunter, what can you tell us about the Black Lagoon? If Imhotep wanted to lead an army out of the pit and into our world, could he do so?
Yes, but it's not that simple. See, the Black Lagoon exists in 2 worlds. The real physical world, which you saw earlier.
They place a rock down on the canvas floor to represent the egg sac.
And the spiritual world of the lagoon itself, which is only accessible to those who walk the line between life and death.
They put a water bottle down to represent the lagoon.
In order to raise an army, Imhotep would need to enter the lagoon and fight his way past the ferryman to the pit that leads to the underworld. But that alone isn't enough. The army would be trapped in the lagoon. In order to free them, he would need a second person in the real world to destroy the egg sac, breaking the barrier between worlds.
Claudia.
Then his army would be able to pass through undeterred.
Jenny looks at Hunter in wonder.
How old are you again?
Hunter smiles.
15.
Right. So this is a battle on two fronts. We'll have to split up to cover both realms at once. Hunter, where's the lagoon now? Before Hunter can answer, Indrid speaks up.
Stop right there, Hunter. I think that's quite enough of this charade.
Hey now, we all want the same thing here, Cold.
And Prodigium can take it from here.
What are you talking about?
Your services are no longer required, Ms. Conliffe. Everywhere you and your merry band of monsters go, you wreak havoc, whether it's destroying the British Museum or...
He looks directly at Nick.
Releasing Imhotep in the first place. This isn't the first time Prodigium has had to clean up your mess, but it will be the last.
Hey man, you're the one that brought us here. You needed our help.
I needed you to unstick Mr. Morton from the lagoon so that it would move before Imhotep got here. Now that that's done, the world has no further use of the Dark Legion.
To everyone's surprise, including Jenny's, Carol stands up.
No. This one is personal. These assholes wrecked my wedding, kidnapped my wife, trapped Nick underground, and killed Evelyn's husband. No way in hell you're stopping us from getting to that lagoon.
All problems that were created because you all decided to handle things on your own instead of coming to me.
There's a tense silence before Nick stands and approaches Cold. Sorry, Cold, but you still need us. You heard Hunter. According to... Nick turns and gives Hunter a questioning look. Them? Hunter gives a single nod, and Nick turns back around, a huge, hey, I got it right, grin on his face. He recomposes himself. According to them, you need a team inside the lagoon, and the only people that can go in the lagoon are those who walk between life and death, which I'm going to assume includes those of us who have died and come back. You got a lot of resurrected types in your rank and file? Indrid doesn't respond. You need me down there. I can team up with the creature and stop Imhotep in the lagoon. Victor speaks up.
And I will join you.
And I as well.
Everyone looks at Evelyn, surprised.
I died in 1933. Long story.
Nick gives her a nod. He turns back to Indrid and smiles. As Dr. Jekyll once said, sometimes it takes a monster to fight a monster. Indrid glowers, trying to think of another way out of this, then finally relents.
We leave first thing in the morning. At sunrise, we see a Prodigium ground crew prepping two anonymous-looking transport planes at dusk. They're each one of those massive birds with two decks, large enough to accommodate personnel, cargo, and a pair of jeeps. The Dark Legion boards one of them, along with a dozen armed Prodigium soldiers, while Indrid Cold stands by the second, which is still being loaded. The Legion's plane takes off, headed west across the Atlantic. Aboard the plane, we get a few snippets of what the gang is up to during the flight. In the cockpit, Hunter clutches a green and black reptilian scale in their hand and closes their eyes, as if listening to it in their mind, and then provides the pilot with a course correction. Jack, who's dressed in a Prodigium tactical uniform but without the hat or gloves, plays a hand of gin rummy with Nick, using a cargo crate as a table, finally catching up after a year apart. Jenny and Carol hold each other and kiss tenderly. When the kisses get less tender and more intense, Carol gives Jenny a mischievous smile and leads her new wife to the privacy of the bathroom. Evelyn sees this, allows herself a little smile, then resumes staring out a window, deep in thought about her recent loss. Victor lies across three pushed-together crates, asleep. He's beginning to look more like himself. Gwen sits with her back leaning against the crates. Larry approaches and takes a seat next to her.
How's he doing?
Honestly, I have no idea. I don't know how long he usually sleeps or even if he sleeps, but he's looking less skeletal, and I assume that's good.
And how are you doing?
Gwen shrugs.
I don't have a good answer for that one either. It's been a weird day. There's a lot going on, and I don't feel like I've been all that useful.
What? Get the fuck out of here.
You carried Set and banished Imhotep back at the museum. Victor took a potentially fatal hit for me. This new kid Hunter knows how to find the Black Lagoon, which I might not even be able to enter since I've never been dead.
And you think that means you're not contributing? Gwen, we've been following you since the moment the first grenades went off. We got separated from Nick and Jenny, and you didn't hesitate. You had the ball, and the rest of us got with the program without even thinking about it. Real alpha shit.
Gwen blushes and looks at the floor. Then, as a way of recovering, she turns back to Larry.
You know the whole alpha wolf theory was debunked in the 90s. It's just a myth that hypermasculine dude bros latched onto.
Gwen and Larry lean closer throughout her speech until they finally kiss. It's a really good one. Their kissing gets heavier until they're interrupted by a deep moan from above them. It's Victor, grumbling in his sleep. Gwen and Larry giggle to themselves like teenagers. In the bathroom stall, our disheveled newlyweds are piled awkwardly with Carol sitting on the closed toilet seat and Jenny sitting across her lap enjoying a bizarre post-coital cuddle.
That was certainly different.
Not how you imagined your honeymoon?
Not remotely. But I suppose I understand the appeal.
If you think this was fun, try doing it on a commercial flight. Personally, I don't think it counts as joining the Mile High Club unless there's a chance you get caught by an air marshal.
Jenny laughs. Carol does too, then sighs.
What's the matter?
Do you think we'll do stuff like this less now that we're married? Are we going to get all boring and domesticated like in those shitty straight sitcoms about dumpy, horny husbands and their joyless, sexless wives?
You don't plan on becoming a dumpy husband, do you?
No.
Then I wouldn't worry about it.
What about if there's kids? A kid. Whatever.
We don't have to think about that right now.
But we'll have to think about it eventually, right? That's something you want?
I want you. For once, that's as far ahead as I'm looking.
There's a knock on the bathroom door.
Are you guys done in there? I don't know how much longer I can hold it.
Jack being in line for the bathroom leaves Nick with an opportunity to talk to Evelyn. He interrupts her window meditations with a gentle greeting.
I'm really sorry about Rick. I didn't know him long, but he was a good man.
Thank you. He was. I always knew the chances of my ever seeing him again were slim at best. In a way, knowing he's gone is easier than living with that uncertainty.
I hope you don't mind me asking, but if you died in the 30s, how is it you're alive now?
That's a complicated question, and I wish I could give a concise answer. I was only dead for a short time, but years later, I realized something had changed, that I'd brought something back with me.
Let me guess. Something terrible.
No, something beautiful.
Speaking of something beautiful, the plane has completed its voyage across the Atlantic and entered Brazilian airspace. A check-in with Hunter in the cockpit shows that our destination is Manaus, a city on the banks of the Amazon River. This will still take a while to get to, since Brazil is fucking huge, and Manaus is about as far from the east coast of Brazil as Indiana is from New York or Spain is from Belgium. As the plane flies over the green countryside, some of the Presidium soldiers rise from their seats along the inner wall of the cargo deck to crowd around the side windows. We close in on one of them, who's still wearing their tactical balaclava despite the heat. They step back from the window. We don't see where they're headed. We cut back to the Sudanese airfield. The second plane is being loaded up with soldiers and cargo. It takes off, and shortly after getting airborne, one of the soldiers walks past a weapons crate. His boot steps in something wet. He bends down and sees that something is dripping from inside the crate. Something red. Is that blood? He waves a comrade over, and the two of them pry open the box. They only have a moment to see what's inside. The dead body of a soldier stripped to her skivvies, packed in what at first appears to be white packing peanuts, until little red light starts blinking on each one of them. Boom. The plane erupts in a fiery explosion. Back aboard the Dark Legion's plane, we visit the cockpit, occupied by Hunter, the co-pilot, and the pilot. The masked soldier from earlier enters the cockpit. The soldier speaks.
Are you Hunter Marin?
Yeah, who's asking?
We cut away from this scene back to Gwen and Larry making out near the sleeping Victor. A second later, the plane rocks violently, then settles. Gwen and Larry giggle.
Who's flying this thing?
They turn their attention back towards each other. Towards the front of the plane, the masked soldier walks down the cargo deck towards the aft, carrying a big, heavy duffel bag, large enough for a person to fit inside if they're curled upright. She sidesteps around a few other soldiers, but her stride is interrupted when she bumps into one. It's Jack, who, of course, appears to have no head or hands.
Ouch! Jeez, what you got in that bag? A bazooka?
Something like that.
The soldier walks on, but we hold on Jack's face, or rather, where we assume Jack's face would be, as if we're watching him ponder something. On the upper deck, Nick notices the plane shake again and decides to visit the cockpit. He approaches the hatch, opens it, and finds that the pilot and co-pilot's throats have both been slashed. Hunter is missing. The plane rocks again, and we cut to a close tracking shot of the duffel bag, which the soldier straps into the back of the Jeep closest to the aft cargo ramp. A second soldier, unmasked, places a hand firmly on the masked soldier's shoulder.
Hey, what are you doing?
The masked soldier grabs her foe's hand, pulls it off her shoulder, and then pulls it off his shoulder with no apparent effort. The soldier screams, and the rest of the regiment jumps to their feet and readies their weapons. Our mystery woman hops into the Jeep's driver's seat and starts the engine. She whips out her phone and taps a button. In the cockpit, Nick sees a label above a switch light up by itself. It reads, Lower Ramp. On the cargo deck, the ramp lowers, violently depressurizing the plane and sending half of the soldiers flying out into the open air. We see Jack lose his footing and then grab hold of some of the netting along the bulkhead. We see the zipper on his jumpsuit start to lower. By now, the Legionnaires on the upper deck have gotten wise. Gwen, Larry, and a groggy Victor are first down the narrow, spiraled staircase onto the cargo deck, and they see what's going on. Seeing them in the distance, the soldier pulls off her balaclava and reveals her smug, bandaged, smirking face. It's Claudia Lawrence. Claudia taps another button on her phone, and in the cockpit, the indicator light for autopilot goes dark. Claudia puts the Jeep in reverse and quickly backs down the ramp, disappearing over the edge just as the plane's flight path goes completely awry. Jenny, Carol, and Evelyn arrive in the cockpit, where Nick is still staring at the controls impotently.
Oh boy.
We cut to outside the plane, where the Jeep is plummeting to the rainforest below, until a huge parachute opens, slowing the vehicle's descent. The bodies of the jettisoned Prodigium soldiers keep falling, and one empty Prodigium uniform gently wafts in the background. On both decks, our heroes and the surviving Prodigium foot soldiers cling to whatever they can as the plane slowly rolls upside down. In the cockpit, Nick and Jenny get the pilot and co-pilot's bodies out of their seats, take their places, and buckle in. Carol and Evelyn follow suit.
Okay, Jenny, can you steady us?
Me? I don't know how to fly an airplane. I thought you did.
Terrific! We finally found something you can't do. Evelyn, how about you?
I'm afraid not.
Carol?
Carol doesn't even answer. She just shoots him a look.
Fine. Here goes nothing.
Nick pulls back on the controls as hard as he can, trying to stop the plane's downward spiral. It's not working. Below deck, Victor clings to some cargo netting with Gwen and Larry hanging on tight like links on a dangling chain. There is no sign of Jack. In the cockpit, the mountain on the horizon is rapidly getting bigger. Nick exhales hard and collects himself.
Okay, we're doing this the hard way. Don't panic, ladies. I'll see you all in a minute.
What?
As Nick's terrifying plan sinks in, Carol reaches a hand forward over Jenny's shoulder, and Jenny clutches it tight to her chest. The newlyweds shut their eyes, wet with tears, and the mountain fills the window. We only see or hear a split second of the crash before all of our senses go blank. The Dark Legion is dead. End of Act 2. And it would be fun to just end it right there. The end of the episode.
Yes, Imhotep and Claudia are still on the loose, and everyone's dead.
All our characters are dead, and that's it.
I mean, there was actually, we debated splitting this into 3 episodes, in which case that would have been
this would have been a cliffhanger of this episode, which I think would have been really mean and fun to do.
It would have been very fun. So this was not part of the plan. Let's talk about this section, because this was the area you'll hear when you hear our planning episode. We knew what our third act was going to be. We're going to get there. We knew how we were going to set things up. Like we talked about, we knew about the tech haunted house kind of thing. We knew about getting the pieces of set. But this was where we needed to connect A to B and didn't know how to do it. And so we got to this point in the writing, and we were texting a little bit like, we don't really know. And then I sent you a voice note, I think. Where
yes, he was so excited about an idea that you used the voice note feature on iMessages, which no one has ever done for anything but exchanging strong, bad impressions.
Okay, now you're just speaking about you and your wife.
Well, no, that would be me and our friend Kate.
Okay, but I was like, okay, here's what they're going to do. They're going to go to Sudan. Imhotep's going to show up. We're going to have this showdown. We're going to have, the sand face, and we're going to have the bird face, and they're going to collide, and then we need to get Hunter kidnapped, right? And we'll get Hunter kidnapped, and that's basically all I had. And then as we went through and started writing this, each of us threw shit in.
Yeah.
That was very bold. And most of my stuff ended up getting taken out. And then you sent me a text when you finished your part.
I was like, oh, I want to keep rolling into Act 3. I haven't gotten to the point where we agreed that Act 3 should start yet. But give me a minute. I have to bring the Dark Legion back to life.
Yes. There was no plan for us to kill the Dark Legion, for the plane to crash. That was a surprise to me.
Yeah, because you hadn't read at that point. You're like, what? Oh, God.
My reaction was I was going to see how you wrapped it all up. I read up to this cliffhanger and I was like, well, I don't know how he's going to get us out of this one. I mean, obviously, we have a character who can bring people back from the dead. That's Nick's plan. But like, how to do that in a way that was interesting and fun. And I think you nailed it.
Well, thank you. Because here's the list of I like the way that we create problems for each other to solve the narrative.
Yes.
The problems that you set up for me were, we need to get our characters from Africa to South America.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to need to get on an aircraft.
Yep.
At some point, Claudia needs to kidnap Hunter.
Yes.
And then that has to lead us into, our third act,
mm-hmm.
where shit all hits the fan. And we wanted to set this one in by the Amazon River as a tribute to the original creature of the Black Lagoon. We know we have a lot of listeners in Brazil. Hopefully this is cool for you. And so with the list of problems that you gave me, I ended up with having to try and figure out what I could do that would escalate the stakes the way that we needed it to, and mechanically put all of our pieces into the place that they need to be. And what ended up being the most exciting possibility to me was a heist on a plane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, how do we get them off the plane? Oh, wait. No, we don't. Plane crash. Spectacular plane crash.
A good callback to the 2017
Mummy. Right. And I think I have a line of like, oh, no, not this shit again. Because that's his first death.
It's more interesting than what I had in mind, which was just that they would get to Brazil and probably have to like hike through the jungle for a while, and Claudia would like come out of the jungle and kidnap Hunter or something. But definitely more action-packed to put it on the plane and have Claudia sort of be there to begin with. But yeah,
here's where we're going to get some pushback from Tom Cruise in the production of this movie. Tom Cruise can fly a plane. And because he's less of an actor and more of a guy who keeps playing versions of himself and then becoming the character that he plays and then adding on top of that, I don't know that he would accept playing a character who can't fly a plane.
I did have a moment where I was like, surely we've made one of these characters fly a plane so far.
So the best of my recollection, none of them have. So. You've seen The Mummy 2017 more times than I have. He doesn't fly that plane.
He doesn't fly that plane.
Good.
Yeah.
Because otherwise that would be bad.
Yes. Yeah, so going back to the beginning of this, because, I was like, okay, well, we'll get them to Sudan. And initially, we weren't going to have Indrid Cold really in this movie at all, except for that one scene with Hunter. But then I had the problem of like, well, how do I get the Dark Legion to Sudan? And I was like, well, shit, we need Prodigium. Like, that's the thing is like, we've tried so hard to like not have Prodigium, to like minimize Prodigium as much as possible, but I do understand in movies of this scale, it is very helpful to have somebody or someone with a lot of resources that can be like, hey, hop on my plane to Sudan, and B, someone who knows what's going on. And so Indrid could give our Dark Legion sort of the rundown on stuff they didn't know, but also give a good recap for people now that we're starting our episode 2. So like,
get a little bit of a briefing in there.
Yeah, it works structurally as kind of working as like a previously on.
Yeah, and it's useful. There was a point I actually wrote this scene and we ended up cutting it because we overwrote this whole idea. But back when they were going to split the party from the wedding to these 3 different locations to face the 3 different monsters, there was a whole bit about how they're going to buy plane tickets. Yeah. And there was going to be a running thing about how we were going to be keeping track of like how exhausted the honeymoon fund was becoming throughout the course of the movie. Funny. And it also just wouldn't fit with the tone. I don't think. I mean, we're light, but that's too much of a gag.
It's pretty funny.
I'm glad we didn't do that. But then there was also, I don't think that this is really going to mess with anything that we talk about later on. There was also a draft of this where Indrid was on the plane with them.
Yeah.
And then I realized that from that point on, I had nothing to do with that character at all. And I kept coming up with things for him to do or say just so I would remember he's there.
Indrid and Prodigium's involvement has been the thing that's been most like written and then deleted and then written and then deleted. Because I had to introduce him to get them there. But then we never had plans for Prodigium in our third act. And so we were kind of, I had written a scene where Indrid was basically like, when he's like, we don't need the Dark Legion anymore, where he was actually like, I'm going to arrest you all. And they had to flee from Indrid to the Amazon. But then that ended up not working. So then we had them on a plane with Prodigium, and we were like, but now we need to so then we had to blow up the plane.
Oh, that was the other problem that we had, is that you did not want there to be a bunch of Prodigium soldiers at the climax. And at first I'm like, all right, well, maybe they can just be cannon fodder that gets killed.
Sure.
And then I'm like, oh, no, we can have the plane fucking crash. Most of our characters can survive a plane crash.
But the Prodigium agents can't.
Yeah, so that gets them off the table.
It's been a lot of,
I think we've been very good at only using Prodigium when we have to.
Mm-hmm.
I think and it usually makes sense that way, that we use Prodigium in the movies where the threat is big enough that, like, we're doing the big crossover.
Yeah.
They would be involved. And then we keep them out of the way. And we give them an excuse to not care because they aren't fond of the Dark Legion to begin with.
Yes. The other thing that I had written is I had killed Victor. In the scene where Imhotep attacks Victor, I had him actually kill him because then Nick could use his powers when he came back, and we could see that he had setback because he could revive Victor. But that didn't really fit with our long-term plans for Victor. And so
I also felt like it was when to kill off a character in the middle of the movie and then immediately bring them back felt, even though doing that in a different context now.
It felt a little bit like Chewbacca in
The Force Awakens.
The third one. The
shitty one, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wanted to get rid of it. It was not working for me, and I also liked. We had this recurring problem, as you guys have probably noticed. We keep trying to find ways to keep Victor and Gwen from having this conversation that he wants to have, and him dying and then immediately being recovered didn't solve that problem for the flight home, or rather for the flight to South America. Whereas having him recovering from a really bad injury means that they can spend 11 hours on a plane together and not have that conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So again, it's all about trying to solve the problems that you put on my plate when it was my turn, and then vice versa.
Well, and this is a good example because sometimes I feel like I've become the bad guy on this podcast because Dylan comes with these great pitches, and I'm finding ways to what can we do to it?
No, Dalton, that's the show. That's the point of the show.
But I sometimes, people love Phantom and Dracula Lives, and so do I. But I feel like because it's the show, my job is to be well, how could we improve this?
And that's my job for you too. You just generally bring in stuff that's really solid.
Well, I was going to say, because this was a case where in this whole section, basically everything you brought to the table, I was like, great, let's roll with it, let's keep it. And everything I wrote, you had to be like, okay, we're gonna have to get rid of this or change this. And you were right to do it. You tightened up my act 2.
Well,
in good ways.
That's kind of easy to say. You're probably right, and
I'm going to use it as an excuse to be meaner next phase.
Sure, but you've created a monster now. I have this confidence where I feel now that I can edit you more, and maybe I will.
Although I did have to push you on a couple things in Act 3.
That's true, and we'll talk about that later.
Should we get into Act 3?
Let's roll on.
So, buckle your seatbelts, ladies and gentlethems, because we're about to kick into the finale of Phase 2 of the Dark Universe, Dark Legion, The Mummy's Hand, right after this.
Attention! On your feet, you maggots! We're the Film Majors, the only podcast about movies other than the one you're listening to right now.
On our show, we discuss big topics such as what makes a good In Your Walls movie, who our favorite on-screen toxic men are, and what's going on, our super famous film news segment.
We're working professionals in the film industry, getting in the trenches every Friday with a different movie, armed with nothing but grit, wit, and 3 BAs in cinema studies. Popcorn is our ammunition.
The couch is our foxhole.
And the cinema is our house of worship.
Find us wherever you listen to your podcast.
Now let me see your war face!
Act 3.
We fade back in on a tight close-up on Carol's face. She opens her eyes as if from sleep, and we pull back to see that she's standing in a cave of coal-black rock. There's a flicker of red light coming from the end of a tunnel. She examines herself. Her body and clothes are intact. She's also totally alone.
Jenny? Jenny, where are you?
Carol pivots and examines her surroundings, finding nothing familiar. She begins to walk towards the light. Now we cut to Jenny, who appears to be in the same cave, but also alone.
Carol? Carol, can you hear me?
She too advances down the tunnel, towards the source of the red light. Carol wanders through the winding tunnel, the light growing more intense the closer she gets to the end. Too intense, in fact. Her eyes have difficulty adjusting. She tries to shield her eyes with her arm as she presses forward. We see Jenny do the same thing. When Carol finally emerges from the cave, the light is so intense that she can barely make sense of what she's seeing. At first, it's like she's looking at a bright, blank white wall. But as her pupils tighten to pinpricks, an image finally begins to take shape. Carol is standing on the cliffs of a black mountain, overlooking a field of what looks like hundreds of flickering matchsticks. There's also a strange whistling sound in the air, like wind blowing through reedy grass. We switch to Jenny looking over the same cliff as she leans over the edge and realizes she has misjudged the scale of the scene. Those aren't matchsticks, and that's not whistling. Each one of the flames below is a screaming, skinless human being. We switch to Carol, making the same realization, stumbling backwards from the edge of the cliff in a flop sweat of panic. She claps her left hand to her mouth. There's a sizzling sound, like a beef patty on a hot grill, and Carol quickly withdraws her hand from her face. There's a blistering burn where her wedding band touched her lip. Carol looks down at her hands, at her rings, which are glowing hot. She watches as her skin begins to burn, peel, blister, and bubble. She screams, but the sound is swallowed up as flames erupt from beneath her skin, enveloping her whole body. Our screen goes white from the blaze, which cuts directly to a pair of hands tearing through white bandages. Nick and Jenny help a panicked Carol free herself from full-body mummy wrap, and once her arms are free, Carol squeezes Jenny tight. Carol is shaking with terror, crying hysterically. Jenny is clearly also shook, but is trying to hold it together for her wife's sake. Nick takes to his feet, and we pull back to see that he's standing beside the burning fuselage of the crashed airplane.
I just want to jump in real quick for a second because I know people think of me as the horror guy. I do want to point out that Dylan wrote that whole last section there with zero input from me. That was all Dylan going skinless, impaled, people mode and burning skin mode. That is, I have corrupted Dylan.
Yeah.
I have turned him into a horror writer. I'm taking full credit.
I told that you've created a monster. But the thing is that we've had a number of characters die and come back screaming or and I'm obviously like Invisible Man, we play it for laughs. Like, whoa, no, that's no good. Yeah. Right. And I thought it was about time that we show the audience what it is they see.
Yes.
And that also, of course...
Which also was not our plan for this movie. We didn't have a plan of anyone like showing hell. This was just something you threw in and it fucking rocked.
But we talk about wanting to keep the momentum going forward for the breadth of our saga. We know hell's a-coming.
Hell's a-coming.
And now we've had a look.
All right.
The smoldering wreckage extends through at least a mile of rainforest. Near the other end of this scar of twisted metal and sizzling foliage, Larry kicks his way out from under a piece of fuselage and snaps his shoulder back into place. Cuts and gashes on his face are healing with incredible speed. One of his ankles is still healing, but he hobbles through the remains of the cargo bay with his head on a swivel.
Gwen! Gwen, if you can hear me, sing out!
Instead of Gwen, we hear a metallic crash. A chunk of airplane hull goes flying from a nearby ditch. Larry rushes over to it and finds Victor overturning a piece of wreckage, revealing Gwen, impaled, with a 3-foot-long metal spike through her chest. Larry hurries to Victor's side, and together they lift her off the pike and lay her gently on her back in the dirt. They don't say a word, they just wait and hope that werewolf magic does its work. Gwen takes a sharp breath in and sits up with a start, clutching the closing wound on her chest. Larry and Victor both embrace her, and she holds them close.
Remember an hour ago when I said I felt left out for not having died?
Did you see hell?
I didn't see anything.
Then you did not die.
What a ripoff.
We cut to Nick standing over Evelyn's badly mangled body, which he and Jenny have dragged out of the wreckage. He extends his hands, and the white bandages fly out from under his sleeves, wrapping Evelyn up from head to toe. There's a glow from beneath the bandages, but rather than returning with a shock like Carol, she awakens gradually, like from a pleasant dream. She awaits patiently as Nick tears away the bandages, revealing that she's totally healed.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. Dr. Halsey's description of your powers were no exaggeration.
Nick, Jenny, and Carol stand over her, all somewhat perplexed.
You seem very recovered.
Shouldn't I be? That's the idea, isn't it?
Evelyn, I know this isn't your first death, but even a brief return trip to hell is typically a very traumatic experience.
What a terrible thing to say. Why would you assume I'd gone to hell?
Everyone goes to hell. Everyone. There's nowhere else to go.
Evelyn looks puzzled.
It's true, Evelyn. I wish it weren't, but Prodigium has never recorded a credible account of any other afterlife.
Then Prodigium and I will have to have a little chat.
A short time later, Victor, Gwen, and Larry reunite with the rest of the team, having met in the center of the wreckage. Gwen and Jenny embrace.
Gwen, thank God you're all right.
See? Nothing to worry about. There are some perks to most of your friends being functionally immortal.
Is Jack with you?
We thought he was with you guys.
What about the child, Hunter?
We haven't seen them.
Oh, shit.
Cut to Claudia's Jeep, driving off-road through the Amazon rainforest. Hunter is now buckled into the front passenger seat, their wrists zip-tied together. Hunter still clutches the ferryman's scale in their palm.
I have to admit, I didn't expect you to be so cooperative.
The lagoon needs me. Turn left here.
Claudia pulls the Jeep onto a dirt path, out from under the canopy of treetops blocking the sky. From here, we can finally see Manaus in the distance. The car hits a speed bump, and there's noise from the back seat.
Ow! What was that?
Claudia turns around, but there's nothing there. A second later, the nothing punches her in the face. Startled, she wrenches on the steering wheel, sending the Jeep into a skid. Thinking quickly, Hunter reaches over and unclicks Claudia's seatbelt. Claudia gets hit by another invisible blow and is knocked out of her seat. Hunter pivots and slams on the brakes, sending Claudia hurtling forward through the windshield. The shoulder strap of Claudia's seatbelt is still wrapped around her arm, and she uses it to swing herself around and perch on the hood of the car with a cat-like stance. Next, the gas pedal pushes down on its own, sending the Jeep speeding off the road and colliding with a tall tree, crushing Claudia's chest. She spits a mouthful of blood, and with the windshield broken, it splatters Hunter's face, as well as the driver's, Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man. Jack puts the Jeep in reverse, pulling back from the tree. Claudia falls onto her butt, with her head now lined up with the grill of the Jeep. Jack shifts back into drive and hits her again. That might not kill her, but it'll take her skull and brains a few minutes to grow back. Jack turns to Hunter and gives them a blood-splattered thumbs up.
Built Ford tough.
I think it's a Jeep.
With a chuckle, Jack pulls the 4x4 back onto the road and resumes the drive into town. As they ride into the distance, Jack's voice echoes back to us.
Oh, neat. Her phone's still plugged in. Do you like show tunes?
The rest of the Dark Legion hikes through the Amazon, heading towards the city of Manaus, where Hunter was leading them. Jenny and Evelyn have armed themselves with weapons salvaged from the wreckage. As dire as the situation is, the beauty of their surroundings isn't lost on any of them. Gwen and Larry walk side by side. Jenny and Carol walk hand in hand, leaving Nick and Evelyn to make conversation. Victor brings up the rear, amazed by the splendor of the continent that he's never seen before. A bird perches on his shoulder as he walks. He smiles. He looks ahead and sees Gwen and Larry lightly bumping shoulders, laughing, sharing a private joke. He retrieves the wolf carving from his jacket pocket, studies it briefly, then puts it away. Another time, he decides. Carol's cell phone rings.
Wow, I can't believe I have bars out here. Hello?
After a beat, Carol lets loose a loud, joyful laugh.
Jack! You beautiful, invisible bastard! You're alive!
The whole gang cheers.
Thank God boomers still memorize phone numbers.
Carol gestures for everyone to quiet down so she can hear the phone.
He's got Hunter and they're headed to the lagoon. Hunter's gonna drop me a pin once they get there.
Way to go, Doc. With any luck, we can still beat Claudia to the scene and...
What is it?
It just occurred to me. If he wasn't on the plane with us, how is Imhotep planning to get to Brazil?
Cut to a view over the Atlantic Ocean, where a strange storm system is traveling fast over raging seas. Upon closer inspection, this storm isn't made of clouds of water vapor. It's a huge, spinning mass of sand. It's an hour before sundown in the rainforest, on the banks of Rio Negro, or in English, the Black River. On the opposite shore is the city, where tourists are returning from boat trips out from where it joins Rio Solomos to become the Amazon. This side of the river, however, is deserted apart from Hunter and Jack, who are examining the circular sigils that appear in the dirt near the Black Lagoon. At the center of Hunter's circles is a strange black egg sac, like the one we saw in Sedan.
So what's the deal with this nasty wet bag?
That wet bag is the linchpin of this whole thing. If that gets busted open, then the door between the lagoon and our world gets knocked off its hinges. We can't let that happen.
Good thing you've got help then.
Enter the rest of the Dark Legion, sweaty from their hike, but ready for action.
Boy, am I glad to see you guys.
Feelings mutual, bud. So where are we, strategically?
Situation very fucked up, Sarge. The lagoon itself won't appear until nightfall, but from what I can tell, the outer edge of it is going to be just past the tree line here.
We're lucky it didn't emerge on the other side of the river, closer to the city. I'd rather not have to worry about civilian casualties or witnesses.
Then I have some bad news for you.
Hunter pulls up a news report on their phone. Beachgoers on the east coast of Brazil watch in awe as a strange brown storm system approaches the shore at unnatural speed. The news camera focuses on the storm as it takes on the unmistakable shape of a screaming human face. Back on the riverbank, Jack says,
Yeah, people are going to remember that.
How long till that storm gets here?
Hunter flips to a video of a perplexed meteorologist standing in front of the weirdest goddamn weather map you've ever seen.
20 minutes, maybe? Right around sunset.
Then I guess we better get ready.
Cut to a bullet blasting through the branch of a tree. From a reverse angle, we can see that Carol is holding a rifle with its barrel smoking. Jenny stands right behind her, leaning over her shoulder and helping her aim.
Excellent. You're a natural.
Here's hoping I can aim that well when you're not there to coach me.
What do you mean?
Aren't you going into the lagoon with Nick?
Not a chance. For as long as I can help it, I'm never leaving your side again.
They kiss. By the egg sac, Hunter briefs Gwen and Larry about the rules of the lagoon. We know Jack is there too, thanks to his footprints in the riverbank.
If you guys are going to help me guard the egg sac, you're going to have to be really careful around these sigils. The more they get smeared or broken, the weaker the lagoon's barrier gets. So step carefully.
That might present a problem.
How so?
Tonight's not really a night where you can count on me and Larry being especially careful.
What are you talking about? Oh, that's not good, is it?
That depends. Assuming there are big supernatural threats within smelling distance, We'll almost definitely go after them instead of you. It's a territorial thing.
Okay, but suppose there aren't any bad guys around. What's to stop you from tearing me apart?
We are.
Jenny and Carol approach, Jenny brandishing a pistol, Carol leaning her rifle against her shoulder.
This pistol only has a few quicksilver rounds, but if it comes to it, we'll be ready.
Wow, that's grim.
It wouldn't be the first time one of us had to take one for the team.
Larry and Carol share a grave look, remembering Henry Jekyll.
Nick, Victor, and Evelyn stand on the banks of the Amazon, watching the sun slowly set over the jungle. It's a particularly gorgeous sunset, deep purples and oranges skipping along ripples of fragile clouds, the kind of unsustainable beauty that can only exist in brief, transitory flashes like this. Without turning around to look at his teammates, Nick speaks to them. I think you two should stay behind.
What? Why should we do that?
Now he turns, the sunset at his back. This is my mess. I'm the one who resurrected Imhotep. It's my responsibility to put him back. I don't want anyone else getting hurt because of me.
I'm sorry, Nick, but it's far too late for that. People have been hurt. My husband, for one.
And if we fail, my Cassie.
But that's exactly it. I've caused enough damage. I can't have your lives on my conscience as well.
And we can't have yours on ours.
We are a team, Mr. Morton. Friends. Consider the notion that if you had not insisted on being alone in the first place, none of this would have happened.
Nick doesn't have a response for this.
You cannot do everything yourself, Nick.
The sun is just a sliver over the treetops, the sky now an eerie, ethereal indigo. Nick turns back to face it. Remember, the tunnel is everything. We need to get Imhotep into that tunnel and back into the underworld before he raises his army. That's the only way to kill him, but also the only way to kill us. None of us can die there unless we go down the tunnel. Evelyn checks her pistols, technologically advanced-looking prodigium weapons.
And if he raises the army?
Nick looks back just as the sun disappears. He won't. They set off into the jungle.
Jenny, Carol, Gwen, Larry, Hunter, and Jack watch the undead trio disappear into the foliage, then look up to see that the sunlight has almost completely faded, and the full moon is growing brighter.
We're out of time.
Go. Put some distance between us. Hopefully you won't be back before we need you.
Right. Good hunting.
Gwen and Larry sprint into the jungle, hastily undressing as they run. We cut away to the opposite riverbank, where the approaching sandstorm begins to buffet the city of Manaus. Citizens scramble in the streets, looking for shelter. The storm passes over the city, dropping lower and lower until it shatters windows. The storm is also getting denser, coalescing from a miles-wide storm into a single dark cloud. It floats over the Black River, over the heads of our team by the egg sack, before spinning itself into a tornado-like funnel and making landfall just past this tree line. Cut to Gwen and Larry running through the rainforest, naked, until they suddenly double over in pain. The moonlight shines through the canopy. Trembling, they fall to the ground and hold each other as their muscles engorge beneath their tearing skin.
Inside the jungle, the tornado ossifies into the shape of Imhotep's new body. For him, there is no clearing with sigils, no egg sack. Instead, he steps onto the banks of the Black Lagoon and smiles. He takes a deep breath, inhaling the still, cool night air and soaking in the absolute silence of the realm. He knows it will not be silent for much longer. Out in the middle of the lagoon, the island now sits on the surface of the water, instead of underneath as it has in the past. The island's cave glows orange-red, and on the shore, facing Imhotep, stand the creature and Nick Morton, side by side. Imhotep smiles and gives a little wave, then spreads his arms and levitates 10 feet in the air. He floats forward until he's halfway to the island, hovering over the water.
We don't have to do this, Nick. I would have great use for a god of death at my side. You'd certainly be of more use than that brute Claudia. Tell you what, why don't you go ahead and incapacitate the creature next to you, and I will guarantee that you and all of your Dark Legion are granted positions of power in the New World.
Nick smirks. You know what I don't understand about you conquer the world types? What in the hell are you going to do with all that power? I mean, really, the whole Earth? Seems like overkill.
You mortals. So myopic. The answer is eternity, my boy. A concept that until now has only been applicable to the afterlife. Everything in the mortal realm is so temporary. You can amass an empire that spans half the globe, and it still collapses in the span of a few measly centuries. And then, once defeated, it's back to the underworld. A place where people like you and I hold no power. A place of suffering. But what if I could bring that power here An army that cannot die because they are already dead? An empire that cannot collapse because its foundation is exempt from erosion? King of the living dead, king of the mortal realm, even the extinguishing of the sun would not end my reign. Back on the riverbank, Carol and Jenny stand with weapons drawn, facing outward around Hunter, Jack, and the egg sack.
You ever been in a spot like this before, kid?
Like this? No.
Well, I have. And when things were at their worst, it was these two ladies that saved me. So don't worry about a thing.
Something rustles at the tree line. Jenny trains her pistol.
Contact! My 12 o'clock!
Carol pivots and matches Jenny's sightline. From the dense rainforest emerges Claudia. She's fully healed, but her stolen Prodigium tactical gear is absolutely soaked in her own blood.
I knew someone would be standing in my way tonight. I'm so glad it's the two of you.
So am I.
Jenny fires her pistol, but Claudia evades and charges with supernatural speed. The bullet lodges in the tree trunk behind her. Carol readies her rifle and fires, spray and pray style. She lands a few hits, but she's only got conventional rounds, so they barely slow down Claudia. Claudia pulls a small throwing knife from her belt and flings it at Jenny just as she's firing another round, knocking the pistol from her hand. Now Claudia pulls a hunting knife and nearly gets within reach of Jenny before she receives a kick to the chest from Jack. She stumbles backward.
You. I owe you an awful death, too.
She swipes at the air with her knife, and the very tip of it disappears for a second as it scratches Jack's skin. When she draws it back, a fleck of blood becomes visible on the metal.
We cut back to the lagoon, where Imhotep hovers over the water across from where Nick is standing on the island. All this, just to keep yourself out of hell? Sorry to break this to you, Imhotep, but everybody dies.
Yes, but you and I know that not everyone stays that way.
While they talk, something moves in the water below Imhotep. On either side of his reflection, Evelyn and Victor swim into frame towards it. Nick yells out, "Now!" The creature extends his arms and rotates his hands around each other, and the camera rotates with them 180 degrees. Imhotep has become his reflection, now under the water instead of floating above it. Strands of seaweed whip out from the floor of the lagoon, wrapping around Imhotep's limbs and neck. Evelyn and Victor reach him and begin to restrain him, but Imhotep fights back, thrashing against them. He kicks Evelyn away, but Victor holds tight, arms wrapped around Imhotep's neck and abdomen. Imhotep closes his eyes, and suddenly the parts of his body that Victor grabs dissolve into wet sand, and Victor's arms pass right through. Imhotep pulls and snaps the strands of seaweed and swims upward to the surface, diving through and floating back into the air. He flies towards the island, where the creature and Nick stand calmly, not moving. Imhotep approaches like a bullet, but right when he should make contact with Nick, he passes straight through as the image of the island ripples around him. A reflection. He's back underwater, not in the air. He growls in frustration.
I just want to say that I love how you've brought back the idea of the Black Lagoon having this strange kind of a reflection and verticality.
Thank you.
And I think it's going to make a really, really cool visual sequence.
That's what I was hoping. Yeah, I was trying to think of like how they could fight Imhotep in a place that's all water. And I was like, oh shit, like the creature controls this realm. He can control what's a reflection, what's real, what's above water, what's below water. Like,
and I just got a picture of like the idea of seeing sand travel through the air, and then so gradually does like the light change in there, and then you start to see the particles slow down and clump up.
Yeah,
and you realize it's under, and then you turn the camera again. I think that's fucking rad.
Thank you.
On the riverbank, Claudia's fight with Jenny, Carol, and Jack continues, while Hunter looks on with their back to the egg sack. Jenny dives for her pistol, but gets a knee to the chest instead, and she rolls away lifelessly. Carol's rifle runs out of ammunition, and while she struggles to load in the fresh magazine, Claudia drives forward for the kill. Jack is able to knock her off target, and the knife misses Carol by inches. Claudia grabs Jack and hurls him toward the river. We see a splash, and Jack is pulled away by the current. Claudia once again turns to Carol and smiles. Carol is still struggling with her rifle. The magazine is jammed. She doesn't know how to fix that, and there isn't time. She looks up at Claudia's sinister grin.
I only wish we could kill you twice.
Just get it over with. I already died once today.
Suddenly, there's a rustling at the tree line. Claudia turns to investigate, and we get a shaky monster POV, low to the ground and very, very fast. We pounce. We cut away to see a massive gray wolf tackle Claudia and dig its teeth into her shoulder. A second wolf emerges, and the two of them pile onto Claudia and start ripping her to shreds with their claws and teeth. Gwen and Larry have returned.
Back in the lagoon, Imhotep still swims in the spot where he thought the island was. He looks above himself to the surface and sees his reflection staring back down at him. His eyes narrow, trying to figure out the riddle of this realm, when suddenly his own reflection dives through the surface and grabs him by the neck. Imhotep wrestles himself, but he's been taken by surprise and he's losing. His reflection holds him from behind in a headlock, arms pinned behind his back. 2 more seaweed strands wrap around his ankles and begin to pull him down to the lagoon floor. The real Imhotep grits his teeth and propels himself downward, creating slack in the seaweed. He flips the fake Imhotep over his shoulders and down to the slack seaweed, wrapping it around his reflection's neck and pulling it tight. His reflection transforms into its true form, that of the creature, and the seaweed releases from Imhotep's ankles as the creature frees itself. Imhotep takes the opportunity to shoot back up to the surface, landing on the real island where Nick awaits him.
Enough games! Get out of my way, Mr. Morton.
Nick raises his fists and gets into a battle stance. In close-up, we see his irises separate. I can't do that. Fight choreography. A lot of this you will have to imagine. They lunge at each other, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Nick is powered up by Set, but Imhotep is just as powerful, and both of them can take a tremendous amount of damage. Finally, Imhotep gets the upper hand and knocks Nick onto his back. He raises a bare foot to stomp Nick's head into the sand. Before he can, there's a roar from behind, and he turns to see the creature rising from the water. Nick takes the opportunity to scramble to his feet. Imhotep is now standing between Nick and the creature, both ready to attack. He smiles and draws a curved line in the sand with his toe. It's the outline of a sword, and with a sudden flash of heat and magic, the sand compresses into black glass. He kicks it up into his hand and holds it ready in front of his face, the glass creating a perfect reflection of his narrowed eyes.
This also rocks.
Thank you. The creature and Nick both attack, and the fight continues. Imhotep fights on both sides, warding off one attacker with the sword while the other closes in from behind. The creature is deadlier than Nick, slashing at Imhotep with his talons and drawing blood. They tighten in on him, and he seems to be unable to keep up with their attacks, but then Imhotep jumps up, kicking off of Nick's chest and flipping through the air backwards over the creature's head. He lands behind the creature and drives the glass blade through his chest. The creature looks down to see his own reflection in the sword's surface before falling to the sand. Nick looks down in shock at the creature as Imhotep faces him down again. Before they can fight, however, they hear,
Imhotep!
He turns to see Evelyn and Victor wading out of the water onto the island. Evelyn has both guns raised.
This is for my husband.
Imhotep smiles again, and Evelyn fires. But the bullets pass straight through his face with an explosion of sand, going through him and hitting Nick instead. Nick falls to the ground, and Imhotep runs to the cave. Evelyn runs to Nick, who's sitting up with 2 enormous bloody craters in his face, already healing over with black goop. No, get Imhotep, stop him! But it's too late. Imhotep has entered the cave and turns to face them. He clenches a fist, and the entrance to the cave collapses, obscuring him behind a mountain of rubble. Nick, Evelyn, and Victor run to it, trying to dig their way in, but it's no use.
Claudia and the wolves wrestle on the riverfront, tumbling over each other, biting and slicing pieces out of each other that grow back within seconds. Carol helps Jenny to her feet, and Jenny recovers her pistol. She trains it at Claudia, but she can't get a clean shot. She and Carol back up towards Hunter, and just in time, too, as the fracas makes its way to the dirt that's marked with sigils. The symbols get flattened and smudged as 400 pounds of muscle and magic roll over them.
Inside the cave, Imhotep approaches the glowing pit. The sound of thousands of screams swells all around. He begins to recite a spell in ancient Egyptian, and the glow gets brighter. Outside the cave, red light begins to cut through the cracks between boulders, shooting out into the lagoon sky. Nick, Evelyn, and Victor stand back as they begin to hear the screams themselves, along with a loud rumbling.
What does that mean?
I think it means we get out of the way. The trio dives to the side just as the cave entrance explodes open. Out of the opening, hordes of demons pour forth. They're humanoid, skinned down to the muscle like Jenny and Carol saw earlier, and consumed by flame. They have no eyes, but patches of sparse hair still cling stubbornly to their skulls. Their human jaws are stretched wide, and from out of them stick the snouts of animal skulls, snapping with sharp teeth and bloody saliva. They run on all fours with the desperation of an animal caught in a net, as if they can still feel the pain of their torture and are running to escape it. The horde runs in a straight line for the water, ignoring our legion and swimming for the opposite shore. Evelyn yells over the screams,
What do we do now?
We pray that the rest of the team is able to protect the seal.
The fight between Claudia and the two werewolves has bulldozed the field of sigils and is now getting dangerously close to Hunter and the egg sack. Once again, Jenny aims her pistol, but everyone's moving too fast. There's too much risk to Gwen and Larry. Carol, in the meantime, has finally gotten her rifle's magazine to click in right.
Yes!
She aims and sprays bullets towards the three monsters, urging them away from the egg sack. Knowing that she's shooting two of her friends, she keeps firing while repeating aloud,
Sorry.
Claudia lifts one of the wolves, it's hard to tell which is which, as a shield, prompting Carol to cease fire. The other wolf clings to Claudia's thigh, but it doesn't weigh her down enough to stop her from spinning around like a shot putter and hurling the wolf in her arms towards Carol, Jenny, and Hunter. Jenny pulls Carol and Hunter down out of the way, but the wolf lands with a heavy thud directly on top of the egg sack.
No!
Back in the lagoon, the ground shakes and there's a sudden crack of thunder. A black rain begins to fall.
You smell that?
Nick sniffs the air and shakes his head.
Scrambled eggs.
The trio watches helplessly as the demon hordes continue into the water, swimming to the other shore before disappearing somewhere beneath the surface. Imhotep stands at the entrance of the cave next to them, grinning.
Out in the living world, the horde of demons begins to crawl out from the Black River, not on the side that the Dark Legion was defending, but on the opposite shore, closest to the city. On the opposite riverfront, the Claudia werewolves fight has spilled into the rainforest, granting Carol, Jenny, and Hunter a moment's peace to look out across the river and observe the army of Hellspawn rising from the opposite side.
Jesus Christ, where the hell did they come from?
The Black Lagoon isn't a corporeal space. Its borders in this world are unpredictable.
We've got to get across.
While they're speaking, the sound of a speedboat engine draws closer from downriver. A small boat from a tourist company pulls right up onto the shore. It appears to be empty, but we know better.
I'm way ahead of you. All aboard?
What about Gwen and Larry?
There's a terrifying roar from inside the jungle.
Stupid question. Let's go.
Nick, Evelyn, and Victor hear a desperate, angry roar and turn to see the creature rising to his feet. He snaps the sword in half and pulls it out of his chest, then throws himself in the midst of the demon horde, fighting against the tide with all his strength. He rips off heads, tosses demons to the side, hacks and slashes, all while slowly getting pushed back to the water's edge.
What's the play, Nick?
You two help him. I'm gonna call for help.
Help? From whom?
In the rainforest, we find an exhausted Claudia limping in the foliage, having finally put some distance between herself and Gwen and Larry. She creeps quietly, and we get a few shots of the wolves stalking, trying to sniff her out. Claudia arrives at the edge of the forest, out to the riverside where she previously confronted Carol and Jenny. She closely investigates the trunk of a tree nearby. Not finding what she's looking for, she moves on to another until... Eureka. She finds the tree with a fresh bullet hole in the trunk. She digs with her knife and recovers a spent, partially crushed bullet, one that had been equipped with a liquid mercury tip. The silver fluid glistens inside the tree hole. She throws the bullet away and pulls her hunting knife from her belt, dipping it into the tree hole and pulling it back out wet with quicksilver. She produces a lighter from her vest and holds it close to the blade, heating the metal and allowing the mercury to fuse like a makeshift alloy. Claudia lifts her new weapon and smiles. The riverfront area of Manaus has been overrun by screaming, skinless demons who bound through the streets chasing civilians with evil intent. We see one of them leap onto a poor soul's shoulders and dig its outer humanoid teeth into the victim's skull before puncturing it violently with the animal head that resides inside its mouth. One demon grabs someone by the wrists, rolls onto its back, then clutches her ankles with its hand-like feet and pulls with all four of its limbs until it tears her in half at the abdomen. A terrified child flees a demon who seems to be screaming, crying, and cackling all at once. He's cornered. He squeezes his eyes tight and prays in Portuguese. But before the demon can split his belly open with his claws, the demon takes a bullet to the head from Dr. Jennifer Halsey, who is running down the street with Carol, Hunter, and the invisible Jack. She shouts to the child in subtitled Portuguese.
Run, it won't stay down long.
She's right. Its head is already reforming. The kid makes a run for it. Jenny and Carol keep taking shots at the nearest demons, joined by the completely terrified local police. Even with these reinforcements, our heroes are totally overrun. Hunter is unarmed, but narrowly evades injury thanks to their invisible guardian, Jack, who keeps demons at bay with a variety of found objects. Carol and Jenny go back to back.
How much quicksilver do you have left?
3 rounds. I've been saving them in case Claudia follows us or God forbid Imhotep breaks loose. But I'm also running low on conventional ammunition.
Me too. Let's hope the rest of the team's having a better night than we're having.
Back at the lagoon, Evelyn rushes towards the horde, guns blazing, and Victor joins her, pulling demons out of the rush to dismember them one by one. Meanwhile, Nick locks eyes with Imhotep and then closes his. Okay, Sed. We're on the same side here. I'm gonna give myself to you fully. Just try to bring me back to my friends when you're done. He opens his eyes and his irises double, then turn black. We zoom in dramatically until the entire screen is black. Then, there's a ripple. The blackness we're looking at is water. A foot steps into view, but it's not Nick's. It's shriveled, decayed, and as black as the water. We zoom out. It's still the Black Lagoon, sort of. But now the water goes on endlessly in all directions. There's no island, no shore, no stars in the sky. And on the surface of the water, Set walks. Not Nick, but Set himself, seen in full as he was in the opening of the 2017 Mummy. He's a shambling, shriveled humanoid covered in spikes with long talons. A few yards away from him, a man in long robes is sitting on the surface of the water, slumped over. He raises his bald head slowly, as if waking up, his back to both Set and the viewer. He stands and turns, and we see it's Imhotep, but now played by Arnold Vosloo from the original 1999 Mummy. He laughs when he sees Set.
Set! Good to see you again, as you really are.
Set is silent.
If you think you stand a better chance against me here, you are sorely mistaken. You remember, don't you, that it was I who sealed you away after Amenet failed to find you a host?
Set is silent.
Your silence does not scare me, deity. I am the most powerful high priest Egypt ever knew. I know enough spells to fill a grimoire designed specifically to keep you from ever touching me or my power.
To demonstrate, Imhotep throws his arms out and a circle of glowing hieroglyphics appear in the water around him, creating a barrier between him and Set.
In the rainforest, one of the wolves carefully stalks through the brush. It stops, catching a whiff of something. It growls, as if communicating something. Then the other wolf rears its head. They split up, pack hunting, triangulating. Quietly, they take an obscure position on either side of their prey. Claudia. They ready themselves and then pounce in unison. But Claudia is ready. She roundhouse kicks one of the attackers and slashes the other with her quicksilver-infused knife, cutting a 6-inch scar into its cheek. Unlike every other wound sustained during this long bout, it does not heal. In fact, it appears to be festering, turning an unnatural black. The injured wolf recoils, tries to dismiss its pain. The other wolf, enraged, strikes again, biting into Claudia's blade arm. Claudia punches the wolf's head with her other fist, and when that's not enough to make it let go, she grabs the sharp end of her knife with her other hand, burning herself, then flips it over and stabs the wolf in the side. The wolf howls in pain, but the voice is strange. It's just a little bit human.
Back with Imhotep and Set. Imhotep stands within his circle of hieroglyphics, confident and cocky that he is safe from Set.
The god of death is god of nothing in front of me!
Finally, Set speaks, with the frail, creaking, high-pitched voice of actor John Kassir.
You are right, priest. Against the odds, you have mastered the magics to keep me at bay. But your mistake, and the mistake of all your people, was to think that I was the only one.
Around Set, tall, shadowy figures appear underneath the water, standing upside down on the surface as reflections. They surround Imhotep, and while each silhouette is unique, we cannot see their faces.
What trickery is this?
One of the figures speaks, with the voice of actor Brad Dourif. The only trickery is you thinking you could escape from us. Another speaks, this one with the voice of Doug Bradley.
Your soul is ours, priest.
No, you have no power here, ghosts. I don't know what you are, but I rule death. Death belongs to me.
A third figure speaks, this with the voice of actor Tony Todd.
Be that as it may, death is only the beginning.
Rays of black light pour from the shadows into Imhotep's heart, and he's pulled into the air, limbs splayed out, stiff in all directions. With a sudden rip, his skin is flayed from his body all at once. He screams until his throat is filled with fire.
Back in the rainforest, Claudia has just sliced the face of one of the transformed werewolves and stabbed the other in the side of the chest with her quicksilver knife. The second wolf, the one that was stabbed, howls a primal, half-human scream of pain. The stabbed wolf pulls away from Claudia, rolls over on its side, and slowly shrinks into the human form of Larry Talbot. Larry struggles to his feet, naked, clutching the stab wound in his side. Beside him, Gwen, in wolf form, whines in pain as the cut on her face inflames with unnatural black pus. They're both in terrible pain.
Had enough yet?
You poor, stupid little man. Is that really how you want to go out? Repeating insipid lines you probably heard in an 80s action movie?
Hey, at least I know what my thing is. What are you supposed to be? You were the Phantom of the Opera. Now you're what? A demonic soldier of fortune? Pick a lane.
Claudia swats Larry with the back of her fist, and he staggers backward. He doesn't fall down. He spits out a mouthful of blood and black bile and keeps talking.
You're right, though. There is more to me than my witty banter and movie star smile.
Please. You were never anything. I was Mr. Hyde, remember? I was there. You're a scrub, a redundancy, a hanger-on who can't even be trusted to hang on half the time. Jekyll didn't even want you on the team.
See, that's where I know you're lying. Jekyll believed in me. He looked me right in the eye when he died. He wasn't just teaching me, he was trusting me with the lives of everyone he wouldn't be around to save. He showed me what it takes.
Larry lets go of his wound, stands tall, and puts his fist up.
And now I'm gonna show you.
Back at the lagoon, Nick opens his eyes back to himself. Imhotep lies at his feet. He has no mouth, it has been smoothed over with flesh, and his eyes roll insanely in his skull. His hands are tied behind his back with wire wrapped so tight it cuts into his flesh. Evelyn and Victor rush over.
Nick, what happened?
I don't know. I gave full control over to Set, and I don't remember.
If Imhotep is defeated, why is the Horde still coming?
Nick thinks for a moment, trying to glean what information he can from the god inside. I think because he's still alive. We need to get him to the bottom of the pit, return him to the underworld. Then I should be able to control the Horde myself and tell them to go back. The group looks around for the creature. He's way out in the water now, still fighting tirelessly against the Horde and ripping a good number of them to shreds before they can get past him. They leave him to his job and slip past the army into the cave. They drag Imhotep to the lip of the pit, but there's a problem. The demons are coming out too fast and too crazy, filling the width of the pit as they scramble over each other.
How are we supposed to get him to the bottom?
At a certain point, I think the source at the bottom has a natural gravity that will pull him in.
Yes, but someone is going to need to push him to that point, and anyone that goes down there will be ripped to shreds. They'll be pulled into hell with him.
Nick thinks for a moment. Then it has to be me.
No, Nick, let's talk about this.
There's nothing to talk about. Like I said, this is my mess. Plus, I have Set with me. Maybe once we're on the other side, he'll take it easy on me.
Nick, please, you mustn't.
But Nick doesn't wait. He charges towards the pit with Imhotep in his hands, but as soon as he gets close, bandages unspool from his body and push him away from its edge, just as they did earlier in the film. Set still won't let him die. Nick grunts and pushes against them, trying to force himself into the pit. It's no use. Victor steps forward and wrenches Imhotep out of Nick's arms.
You cannot do everything yourself, Nick. We are not meant to be alone.
He steps to the edge of the pit. Vic, no, don't! Victor looks at him.
For all of my friends.
He jumps, clutching Imhotep to his chest, diving into the water between demons.
In the rainforest, an enraged Claudia charges ahead with her quicksilver blade in hand. Larry puts his palm out and catches her fist, letting the blade stab all the way through his left hand. He closes his grip and lays a haymaker on Claudia's jaw, and the impact rattles the treetops. Claudia falls backward, but the blade stays in Larry's hand. Larry pulls the blade out of his left hand and wields it with his right. The veins in his left hand turn black. He clenches it, fighting the pain. He roars and dives forward. The camera doesn't follow him. Instead, we hold on the wounded wolf in the background, on Gwen, as she gradually morphs back to her human form. The cut on her face remains, a dark gash from her temple to her chin. She looks up, regaining her senses. As she realizes what's happening, she cries out,
Larry!
Two bodies fall limply into view. The first is Claudia with her makeshift weapon plunged into her eye. The second is Larry, black veins spread across his chest. Gwen rushes to Larry's side, crying, trying to shake him awake. It starts to rain. She screams his name, and the cry echoes above the canopy. You can just barely hear it on the demon-infested streets of Manaus, where Carol and Jenny have hunkered down in an abandoned restaurant. Across the street, Jack helps Hunter climb up onto the balcony of an apartment building, demons clawing at his legs. Hunter reaches down to pull him up in turn. They're straining. They might not be strong enough.
Victor swims down the lagoon's tunnel to hell, pushing through the demons as best he can. The demons climb over him and Imhotep, who lets out muffled screams. The demons claw at them, tearing at their flesh and picking them apart. They lose their feet, calves, chunks of their torsos. Victor loses an arm, but at this point Imhotep is just a head and body, so he grabs him by the neck with his one remaining hand. Eventually, the demons take Victor's legs as well, and he can't swim anymore. But it's okay. They've been sucked into the gravity of the black sphere at the bottom of the pit, the black sphere that leads to hell. They drift towards it, demons still picking at them, until finally Imhotep makes contact and is pushed through by Victor's hand. The screen fades to black. Victor Frankenstein blinks his eyes open. He's lying on a steel table in a pop-up medical facility in Manaus. A curtain separates his area from the rest of the room. Jennifer Halsey sits at his side, stitching his lower left arm to his upper arm. His other arm has already been sewn back together, and his legs and bits of his torso lay spread out near him, awaiting surgery.
This is not hell.
Jenny smiles and flicks a tear from her eye. She looks weary, like she hasn't been sleeping, but has been crying. The curtain pulls over and Nick enters. He looks pretty rough, too. Behind him, there are more triage areas behind more curtains. No, but you sure knocked on death's door. We flash back to the moment that Victor pushed Imhotep into the black sphere, himself wrist deep in its circumference. At the top of the pit, Nick's eyes widen and double. They're mine. The horde freezes, panting in place. Down in the pit, the demons stop and grab Victor, pulling him away from the sphere. The hand that was already inside doesn't come with him. They pull him up to the surface while the rest of the demons make their way obediently back down the pit. We cut back to the med tent. We were able to recover most of you. Well, except your right hand. For that we had to use, whatever else was lying around. Victor looks down at his right hand, smaller and a darker shade than the rest of him. Imhotep's.
And the demon army?
Retreated back into the lagoon as soon as Imhotep crossed over. You did it. Despite this good news, there's very little joy in Nick's eyes.
We recovered this as well.
Jenny places a wooden carving of a howling wolf on the table next to Victor.
Is this yours?
Victor nods. He picks up the carving from the table and looks at it. When he looks back up at Jenny, she looks like she's about to start crying again.
Victor, there's something you should...
She stops. She's having trouble saying it.
We've had a casualty.
Jenny helps the legless Victor into a wheelchair and leads him to the makeshift room next to him. The curtain pulls open, and from Victor's POV, we see Gwen, with tears in her eyes and a black scar from her temple to her chin, sitting at Larry's bedside.
He's sustained serious injuries from a quicksilver weapon. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do.
Larry is halfway conscious, but he manages a smile of recognition as Victor wheels in.
Larry.
Hey, Vic.
Victor looks back at Gwen. She acknowledges him, happy to see him alive, but that's not where her mind is right now. She looks at Larry, and Victor does too. The entire Legion is crowded into Larry's makeshift hospital room now. Nick, Jenny, Jack, Carol, Victor, Hunter, and Evelyn all stand inside the curtain, with Gwen seated by the bed.
Glad to see you made it all right.
One of Larry's monitors beeps. Jenny looks at it, then at Larry, then at Gwen. Gwen asks something with her eyes. Jenny nods solemnly. Now Gwen asks Larry for something, just as silently.
Thanks for everything, you guys. I mean it. But we need some time.
The Dark Legion files out of the room one by one, starting with Evelyn, each one taking one final word, one final look at their comrade in arms.
Thanks, Wolfman.
We'll miss you, Lair Bear.
So long, kiddo.
Jenny tries to speak and can't. She adjusts her tunic, nods, and lets a tear drop. Nick takes her by the arm and leads her out. He doesn't say anything either, but he smiles warmly and winks. Larry smiles back. Only Gwen and Victor remain now. Victor turns to leave, then stops himself.
Larry, I have a gift for you.
On the table adjoining Larry's cot, Victor places the small wooden wolf carving. Larry smiles tearfully. He knows what this means.
Thanks, Vic.
Victor steps through the curtain, leaving Gwen and Larry alone. They're quiet for a long time, just looking at each other.
Larry, I can't.
You don't have to say anything. Let's just be here for as long as we can.
We take an overhead view of Larry's room and let the two sit in silence together. We slowly crossfade to a funeral parlor in South London. The place is nothing fancy. It's barely half full. In attendance for Larry's viewing are the Dark Legion, including Hunter and Evelyn, Cassie Falk, Larry's Uncle Nigel, and the Brixton Bloodhounds, Shilpa, Jer, Drake, and Rosie. Carol and Jack finally meet Larry's little girlfriends and boyfriends, and we see them swap some stories and some laughs. Nick shakes hands solemnly with Uncle Nigel. Hunter and Jenny are engaged in some kind of playful debate. We fade to a little later as Gwen is stepping out of the funeral home. She walks past someone who speaks.
I've been thinking.
Gwen turns to see Nick, leaning against the building, like he'd been waiting for her to walk out of it. If he were a smoker, he'd be smoking.
If this really is a family, I don't want to be the kind of family that only sees each other at weddings and funerals.
Or apocalyptic emergencies.
Yeah, or apocalyptic emergencies. From now on, when one of us is in trouble, or when one of us makes a mess, I'd like us to clean it up together.
I'd like that too.
In the parking lot, Jenny, Carol, and Jack stand together, talking to Hunter.
You have our numbers, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you'll call us first if anything happens, okay? Before Indrid?
Yes, ma'am.
And whenever the lagoon moves, you're going to text us and let us know where you're going.
And if I'm within 100 miles, we'll meet up at the closest Waffle House or regional equivalent.
Carol gives a stressed smile while Jenny pats her on the back, rolling her eyes.
I just worry is all.
Come on, darling. We have a much-needed honeymoon to get to.
Oh, yeah. Where are y'all going for that?
Barbados. Ever been?
Can't say that I have, but you gals have the best time.
Carol and Jenny exchange a look, then turn back to Jack.
Why don't you come with us, Jack?
On your honeymoon? No way. I'm not going to be your squeaky third wheel. You two deserve your alone time.
Well, I mean, you'll have a separate room.
On a different floor.
And I think after all this, we all deserve a honeymoon.
Jack still politely declines, and Carol and Jenny say their goodbyes and head to the main road to wait for their Uber.
Guess I should call for a ride back to the lagoon.
Say, why don't we both go?
What? Why would you want to do that?
Well, you know, you're by yourself out there, and I kind of am too. There's not much of a world out there for an invisible man. I figure we could be alone together.
Hunter shakes his head and gives Jack an exasperated look.
Dude, you just got invited to Barbados with your best friends.
They were being polite.
They weren't. They like your company. We all do, because you're a good guy, and it doesn't matter if you're invisible or not. Good guys get noticed.
Jack thinks about this.
Go live your life. Leave the lagoon to the professionals.
Jack hesitates, then runs after Carol and Jenny.
Hey, wait, you guys!
Gwen looks out at the parking lot of the funeral home, watching everyone leave. The Bloodhounds are packing into their shitty minibus. Jenny, Carol, and Jack's Uber pulls away. Cassie is starting up her custom van. Victor leans against the passenger door, looking at Gwen but pretending not to. When he realizes he's been caught, he opens the door and slumps into the van. Gwen takes a beat, then smiles. Gwen slides open the back door of Cassie's van and plops herself onto an empty seat.
So, where are we headed?
Victor and Cassie look back, surprised. They both smile. Cassie laughs and puts the van into gear.
Ever been to Paris?
As the minibus, the van, and the taxi drive off, Evelyn emerges from the funeral home. It has, in fact, been her that Nick's been waiting for. He offers her his arm, and she takes it.
Jenny tells me you're an expert on ancient Egypt. I might need your help with a couple things.
Is that so? Because Jenny tells me you're very bad at asking for help.
I think I've learned my lesson on that front.
They smile and start walking together in a very courtly fashion into town. They pass casually by a cafe window, through which we can see a television. It's a newscast playing footage from the demonic invasion of Brazil. The headline reads, "Hell on Earth, does the Manaus incident prove the existence of Satan?" Cut to black. The end.
And that is Dark Legion, The Mummy's Hand. And that wraps up Phase 2 of our Dark Universe. There's one more episode left in the season, but as far as movies go...
Yeah, and also we're wrapped. We already recorded that episode.
Yes.
So for us, it's party time / sleep time, probably.
Well, I mean, we still have to edit this thing and get all the cast recordings and score it. And
no, we have another 2 weeks of really hard work.
Yeah, we don't get to sleep yet. But in 2 weeks, you will be able to hear our planning episode. So if you want a behind the scenes look at how we came up with all this crazy shit, listen to that, including a discussion on how we decided to kill Larry Talbot, because we were very torn. We didn't necessarily go into this with that plan. We thought maybe we wouldn't kill anybody at all.
Yeah, actually, that was the kind of prevailing idea at first, that this would be the one where no one dies.
And of course, we didn't want to, Larry being like our main black character.
He's the most prominent black character on the show.
We did not want to kill him.
The optics weren't great, but the thing is that we like to be thinking that we're living in a world now where we'd like to think this, whether or not it's true, but where we, even like as an actor, because opportunities are being given out a little bit more equally, that it's not like, oh, of course they killed off this character, that all the white actors get to keep their job. First of all, there are no real actors other than our friends who, like us, are not getting paid.
Well, and also, I think our dark universe has been very diverse.
Yeah, and increasingly so, right?
Yeah.
So it's the kind of thing where we were talking about it, and you'll listen to the episode to hear more about it. At the time, where like we had ideas about where we wanted to take other characters, but we didn't really have an idea of where we wanted to take Larry. And what's interesting is, as tends to happen, because I wanted to focus so much on Larry in this story, I ended up getting a lot more invested in him. I've been trying to invest in him more and more since The Wolfman, especially because House of Dracula, I do feel like he got shortchanged a little bit. It's a really big ensemble, and his role kind of made him sort of suck. And then The Werewolves of London was a commentary on that, right? But I kind of went back to how when I first designed Larry as a character for The Wolfman, he was supposed to represent the sort of naive rich kid that I used to be. And now he has lost all of this power and wealth, but found something that's more meaningful to him. And we talked about how, in last episode, about how this movie was kind of about the characters acknowledging each other's change.
Yeah.
Larry now, I identified with very strongly as somebody who used to have a lot of like material wealth and that kind of like comfort in life, and then has found something else that ends up making him really grateful for what he now has. Apart from his sourness towards Victor, which I think is very understandable in the beginning, Larry's kind of really put together now and is really, I think, appreciative of the people who are around him and wants to be good to people. And like, that's the currency that he has now. And I think that that's what he ends up, he uses that currency. He used the last of it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm going to miss him a lot now, but it's also a matter of once you bring a character to that point, especially in like a horror franchise where everything's about bad things happening to people.
Yeah.
Where do I take him from there?
He had completed his character journey, but also I feel like this is an important thing for the Dark Legion's journey, because as I'm going to say we will talk about on the next episode, this movie was also kind of about reestablishing them as a family, where the first Dark Legion ends with everyone going their separate ways and kind of being angry with each other or being very dissatisfied. This was about them finally learning to appreciate what they have in each other and the bonds they have. And as your line that you wrote near the end about like weddings and a funeral, or like, families that only see each other at weddings and funerals, like, I think the beginning of this movie sort of symbolically enshrines this group as a family through the wedding. And then they have to deal with their first death in the family. Because even though Jekyll died, that was right after they had gotten together. Right.
They weren't really a family
yet.
They
weren't a unit yet. This is their first loss as a unit, where they have felt like they are friends. They are this, I just keep saying family over and over again, but this is the first death in the family. And that is something that is going to further their bond, and bring them closer together. And it won't be the last death in the family.
No, it won't.
And so this also kind of serves to usher us into what may be a darker phase 3.
Yeah, phase 2 was our like sort of experimental. We're throwing a lot of crazy ideas at the wall. We're going to throw a lot of curveballs at you in terms of like what kind of stories we're telling. The next one is going to be, well, we still want to surprise you sometimes.
And we don't know. There's going to be a lot. There's going to be more movies in the next phase. And so there's still going to be a lot of tonal changes. Like, it's not just going to be like everything's going to conform to one sort of feeling. We're still trying not to be Marvel, right? And
right.
Like, make
we
all
want
the
every one of
the same.
We never want to do the same thing twice. But
you'll still probably have a mix of action and comedy and horror.
Yeah. But what we have plans for some heavy shit down the road.
Yes. And I think this is a good sort of end of phase 2 and ushering us into that new phase. And R.I.P. Larry, we had a lot of predictions for who would die. I do have from the Discord, people were making predictions of character deaths. Mist Drake on the Discord thought that Carol or Jenny would die.
We couldn't do that. There's no way.
The theory was that then one of them would get brought back on Imhotep's side. So it would be Carol versus Jenny. But yeah, we couldn't kill our gay couple right after they got married.
And like, I've talked about this. I don't know if it was on the air or on the Discord about how like so much of my personal writing aesthetic comes from like Joss Whedon, for better or worse. Not
that would be a very Whedon-esque move.
Yeah, he just loves to, whenever people are happy, just kick the puppy, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I fight those instincts all the time. I don't want to do that.
Alan in the Discord thought that Jack would go.
That would have been the other one I considered, because there was a point where we were actually texting each other after we recorded the brainstorming episode where we decided we were going to kill Larry. And in that episode, you will hear that one of the ways that Larry came up as a character to kill is when we're talking about things we wanted to do with different characters. We didn't mention Larry very much. I listened back to that recording and I thought, who we mentioned even less than Larry is Jack.
Yeah.
But so I almost like, because I was having fun with Larry, I was almost like, can we do a switch here? And then I realized that one of the reasons I was enjoying Larry so much is that I was building to his death and I was trying to make it mean something. And then if I pull that away, then I've squandered the opportunity to do something meaningful with the character.
Yeah, you don't want to kill off a character because they're not doing anything, because then it doesn't, the death doesn't hit, right? And like the fact that we've found so much for Larry to do also means like it's going to be like he takes on such a bigger leadership role in this one, and so it hurts harder, when he dies.
I also like that what we did end up doing with Jack is, at least for my part, I was writing Jack as somebody who was trying to be positive now, and like really like trying to apply his therapy. But when you push him, he will go fucking nuts on you because he's like underneath his attempt to be his best self is just like so much fucking rage, which is why he will smash a person into a car with his car over and over again and then give you a thumbs up.
I do want to shout out Roxanne in our Discord, who successfully predicted that Larry would be the one to die.
Right. Didn't she specifically say either nobody dies or Larry dies?
Probably.
Because that was pretty much our exact thing.
Although you will hear me pitch an idea for Gwen's death that I knew was a bad idea, but I think would have been special. Also, it was your call to to give the wolf statue to Larry at the end, which you'll hear was not in our original plan. That came out while you were writing the ending of Act 3. And we ended up having to go back and kind of seed that earlier in our revision.
Yeah, Larry had to know what the wolf thing meant in order to do something.
So we went back and wrote that scene with Jack and Larry on the plane Victor and Larry, where Victor talks to Larry about the carving, and then that made it powerful when at the end, like, Victor's been building up this whole time to give this carving to Gwen, and then he sees Larry's sacrifice and says, no, this is for you,
Yeah, the idea of having him give the statue to Larry, I thought was, for one thing, I had originally structured the end of this differently, and you talked me out of it, and I really liked the way that it turned out. Originally, because when you handed this to me, because we were writing in shifts and we knew we had certain things we were going to have to intercut. We had our whole Return to the Jedi cross-cutting 3-part finale.
But happening. I had kind of gone through, and I had written my entire climax before you had even started.
I didn't even know exactly how we were going to split up Claudia and Gwen and Larry and the rest of it. And like, I worked off of the spine of the Imhotep stuff with like, okay, this is when the Hellspawn come out. I have to give them a place to go and something to do. And then your section ends with Victor going into the pit, getting close to that black orb, and then waking up.
Yeah.
And then right after that, you put in the flashback of Nick retrieving Victor.
Yeah.
And I thought that what might be interesting from that is to show one piece of the climax, resolve that in flashback in that same sort of structure, where we would get up to a certain point in all of these 3 events, all these 3 sort of battles that were happening. And then we would stop following each of them a little bit. And then Victor would go in, and then Victor would seemingly die. We see him wake up, and then we learn what happened as he learns it through flashback.
Yeah.
Which I was going to do in order to try and prolong the revelation of which werewolf had been mortally wounded until Victor finds out. I wanted it to be that we don't know which one of them was hurt, which one of them gets stabbed. That would be the last thing that we see from that one before we cut back to Victor.
Yeah.
And then when like Jenny draws the curtain open, it's like a reveal that he looks up and he sees that Gwen's alive and he sees that Larry's dead. And that's such a weird, confusing feeling for him. And I wanted the audience to share that feeling. But you were right that what that ended up doing was that it separated Larry's death from the climax.
Yeah.
I initially thought that was a good idea because it would mean that the entire like last 5 or 7 minutes of the movie would belong to Larry, like consecutively. But I do think that the way you went in, you recut, re-edited, but like in my head, it's a movie. You recut the entire climax to put these different threads back together in a way that was more linear. And I think it works really well.
Yeah, I think your idea was a very good one and like a good impulse and very interesting. I think the problem that ended up happening in execution was that the Black Lagoon comes to this climax of Imhotep and the shadowy figures, right? And it was like this sort of very heady kind of, we talk about this in the next episode, how like there would be an action climax on the surface and then maybe a more metaphysical climax in the lagoon. And so we have this kind of metaphysical climax where Imhotep is torn apart, by these beings. And then the Victor stuff sort of happens on the downslope of that, right? You sort of reach this peak of the action with Imhotep's undoing. And then it's, okay, now how do we clean up this mess? And by taking Larry's final fight with Claudia out of there, the other side of things didn't end up building to any kind of climax. It was delayed. And so it kind of felt like it felt disjointed where we had a climax and then we cut to after the battle and it feels like, oh, everything's over. Things are starting to calm down. And then we kind of cut back to the climax and it sort of created a weird disjointed sort of momentum. And I think we needed to have a fight to cut back to from the Imhotep thing, like a big Claudia's death, to kind of, I think, have the impact of the climax really hit the way it was supposed to. But I like the idea of the flashback thing, but we would have needed something else to happen.
Yeah, you were right. Like, I'm still sort of proud of the idea, so I wanted to put it out there on the air. But you were ultimately right, and I think that you're right that it also serves the other stories in the climax better to put them all on an even footing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I had a really great time writing the third act in particular.
Yeah, third act is fun.
The second act was a real slog at the time. I really like it now that we've read it through. I like it a lot more now than I did when we sat down. There was a period of time I was a little bit worried that this was too much of a mess.
Same. Honestly, while writing Act 2, because we had so many threads to tie together, and it's like, the thing with all these characters too, you need to make sure everything's justified. Like you got to make sure like, oh, well, if all these characters are going here, wait, why would that character go there? That character doesn't have a reason. Wait, well, then this character would do this. Well, now I need to come up with a reason why they don't do that because we need them to be in the right spot. And like, so you have to like thread all of these needles at once. And, look at us figuring out the screenwriting is hard.
Yeah.
And writing franchises is hard. But it is. And
it is really hard. And of course, we would love to have had another month to work on this.
Oh,
but
sure.
It also, like I think I said in the previous episode earlier today, is that it does create a better sympathy with the screenwriters who are working on these big blockbuster movies, on these incredibly tight deadlines, and with restrictions that we don't have because we don't have any oversight, right?
Even The Mummy, like Tom Cruise, like rewriting the film on the fly, and then Kurtzman having to make it make sense. Like, I don't blame him. That's an impossible job. Tom Cruise comes up to you and says, hey, I want to die 40 minutes into the movie. What do you do with that? You have to figure out a way to make that make sense. And it's a tough job. And
when these movies eventually get made, after the studios rightly cave to the demands of the Writers Guild,
of course,
and then eventually when we become members of the Writers Guild,
of course,
which I suppose it's fortunate for you all that we're not right now because we can continue making this show. It is then you'll get to see how the studio and Tom Cruise change all of our ideas. You'll have the first drafts right here.
Yeah, Act 2 felt crazy. I felt like we were crazy. I felt like the movie wasn't going to make any sense. But I think we tightened it up, and Act 3, once we knew where we wanted to land on things, I think everything came together. And I think I was like fully prepared in Act 2 to sit down and have this kind of discussion where I go, man, I don't know if this movie worked. Like, I don't know. Maybe this is our Age of Ultron. Like, maybe this was like, maybe we didn't, we set the bar too high for ourselves and we didn't rise to the challenge. And maybe I'll feel that way in the future, but right now I don't feel that way. Right now I'm pretty happy.
Right now I'm very proud. Now you all are going to listen to this. You're going to tell us how you feel. We hope you'll tell us how you really feel. You usually do.
Yeah.
But I thought that this was maybe going to be an exercise at the end of this reading and talk about, hey, now we've kind of learned our lesson. Like finally our the incredible hubris that had us launch the show in the first place has finally like truly matured and taught us our lesson. No, I think actually we did, considering we did this in like 3 or 4 weeks.
I think it's pretty good.
I think we did a pretty good job on the first draft of the script, and now it's canon.
And now we do have to lock it in.
Yes, we do.
It's alive! In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God.
So that is a picture lock, not just on Dark Legion, the Mummy's Hand, but on all of Phase 2. Here's what's going to happen now. In 2 weeks, you'll be able to hear our Time Warp episode back to before we had any of these ideas and hear us come up with them and workshop them in real time and figure out how we're going to make this movie happen. And then we're going to take a little break. I think our plan is to come back in October with Phase 3 and announce our slate and answer questions from you and respond to your comments. If you would like to hear from us in the meantime, you can join the Patreon, because if we hit $200 a month, and what are we at right now? Do we know?
We are currently at $160 a month.
So we need 8 more subscribers. If we get 8 more patrons paying $5 a month,
or fewer, if someone wants to pay more than $5 a month. If someone wants to pay
more, we will start the bonus podcast. And that's even if we're on hiatus. We will start our bonus feed, which is 1 episode a month, talking about non-Dark Legion related things. We will watch The Pope's Exorcist. We will pitch other types of reboots. We will do whatever you guys want us to do.
Hotel Transylvania, etc.
We will do our Hotel Transylvania watch through.
There's a new Dracula movie coming out.
That's true. If you want to hear us talk about Last Voyage of the Demeter. But anyway, become a patron and you can hear from us in the downtime. And until then, thank you all for joining us for Phase 2. I know we really jerked you around on this one, and it was a crazy time. Things are going to get even wilder in Phase 3, and the guest episodes are going to get even better, and we've got a lot of fun stuff planned. So please stick around. Follow us on social media. Become a patron. Send us your questions, whether on DM or email or on Discord. And until next time,
stay afraid of the dark universe.